Hello, today is Monday, September 15th. Welcome to episode 501 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. I'm advisory board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by NSI's executive and deputy executive directors, Jamil Jaffer and Martha Miller, and fellow Jessica Jones. It is great to have the crew here. Senior level discussion from NSI. We're going to talk about Russia's recent actions with respect to Ukraine and Europe. Russian drones have violated airspace of both Poland and Romania in the last few days. NATO has responded by shooting down Russian drones. This is the first time there has been open conflict between NATO and Russia in world history. Also, notably, the pace of Russian attacks on Ukraine has increased dramatically in the last few days with massive drone strikes against targets in Kyiv and other locations, particularly against civilian targets. So there's a whole question about Russian behavior. Recall that about a month ago, there was a famous summit between President Trump and President Putin in Alaska, in which a B-2 bomber was flown over Vladimir Putin's head. He seemed to laugh at that, in my recollection. So, folks, let's talk about what is happening in Moscow, the possible Trump administration reaction to these events. Martha Miller, I'm going to go to you first. What are your thoughts?
Look, I mean, Russia's been conducting a sustained campaign of hybrid attacks across Europe since 2022. But this is going a step further. It's not like Russia doesn't know where their drones are going. And so I think, they're trying to play this game of plausible deniability while at the same time being actively aggressive towards, our NATO partners. So I think, he's testing resolve post-summit, and he's, trying to see how NATO will react, how Washington will react. And I think the bottom line is, I think he feels pretty darn confident. And this is a sign that he feels like he can pretty much do whatever he wants.
Jamil, your reaction.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think obviously the challenge here is that President Trump is frustrated with Vladimir Putin. He expressed that very clearly in his statement over the weekend, where he said, look, if the NATO nations are willing to go along with it, I'm ready to impose massive sanctions on Russia and cut off their oil supplies, but the NATO nations need to come with me. He also is now recognizing increasing the Chinese role in this conflict and threatening to, alongside European nations, impose even larger tariffs on China to get them out of this fight and get them to pull out, saying that all of these sanctions, these new sanctions on Russia, these new tariffs on China will be pulled down once the Ukraine war comes to an end. The problem, of course, is the Europeans aren't the big buyers of Russian oil. China and India are the big buyers of Russian oil. And at the end of the day, it's not about pressure on the European nations. It's not about economic pressure on Russia. What it requires is military pressure on Russia. And that's the thing President Trump hasn't yet been willing to do. But hopefully, maybe this is getting him there. What he really needs to do is to double down on Ukraine, give them a ton more weapons, let them take to the battlefield and get a real advantage on the battlefield. That's what's going to put pressure on Vladimir Putin to come to the table, not a bunch more economic sanctions that Vladimir Putin has laughed off before and that, frankly, have been less than effective on other countries like China and Iran as well.
Jones, what are your thoughts? Sanctions or more weapons to Ukraine or something else?
Is the question, what do we think President Trump's going to do, or what should President Trump is he going to do? Because I think those are two very different things. As Jamil pointed out, President Trump, brought up European unity when it comes to finally punishing Russia with sanctions. But his first response when the drones were shot down over Poland was basically to go, oh, what's up with that? Basically, what's up with that? And then later on, a few days later, to say, oh, that could have been a mistake. When you have our European leaders saying, as Martha pointed out, there was definitely no mistake. These Russian drones didn't just happen to find themselves over Polish airspace, right? And so he seems to be coming up with a lot of reasons to not come down hard on Russia. We see in his, comment about European unity, he's now asking Europeans to consider sanctions on China. That's a new requirement that we haven't seen him come up with before, and a big ask when it comes to European nations, just it is for the United States. We're still in the middle of, trade negotiations with China, haven't gotten really far on that as well. So it's hard to see his conditions and ultimatums seem to come down more on partners and allies than it does on Russia. So I'm not sure we're going to see him come. I find it hard to see what he's going to do when it comes to countering Vladimir Putin directly.
All right, so I am going to take a position to the right of Jamil.
There's no room to the right of me, Lester. There's no room.
That is false. That is false. That is very false. You're calling for more weapons for Ukraine. I don't think that's enough. I think Vladimir Putin only understands a punch in the face, and I think we need to do more than just come directly to the aid of Ukraine. The idea that he didn't know he was sending drones over Poland. Granted, Poland's borders have changed over the last 100 years or so. But realistically, folks, Russia knew exactly what it was doing. It knew those drones were going into Polish airspace. It knew the Russian drone was going into Romanian airspace. They're not making mistakes. They're doing this on purpose. NATO and the United States need to respond in kind, and in fact, need to ratchet it up and to show that we're going to respond in a bigger way. I don't want to be specific about what I think the response should be, but I think Putin's not going to take it seriously unless it's a real punch in the face. That's not just economic sanctions. The other issue here is Putin is trying to put pressure on Trump. He sees Trump trying to divide Russia and China. He's trying to put pressure on that. He's kind of inviting the U.S. to do these economic sanctions on China, which he thinks will push them closer to Russia. So I actually think that route is fraught with peril in the long run, and the smarter play is the direct move against Russia. Anyone want to react to that?
But Les, why are you so?
Jamil,
it's fine. Why are you so leery to say what that thing is? I mean, you said we should do more, but you don't say more what, so it's not really substantive. Tell us what you mean. I mean, should we take strikes against Russia directly? NATO attacking Russians on Russian territory? What do you want us to do?
Russia has flown weapons into NATO airspace. We should respond in kind and ticket up one.
We should fly.
He only understands violence and getting hit in that way. Sanctions aren't the answer in this case, is what I'm saying. Sanctions won't do it, even if you take the step of trying to curtail Chinese purchases of Russian oil. That's not going to be enough, and I think might actually work.
So we should just fly NATO drones into Russian airspace. We shouldn't attack anything. We should just fly NATO drones.
I think we should start shooting down Russian stuff over Ukraine.
That was the announcement this morning, was to create a no-fly was to shut down the airspace over Ukraine, something that we have not, NATO has not committed to, and the United States has not committed to before.
And that's proof that, Lester, you're not to the right of me, because I argued for that in writing with General Alexander at the beginning of the war 2.5 years ago. So thank you for finally coming around to the correct point of view on the need for a clear airspace over Ukraine.
Well, you were wrong 30 months ago, but now I'm right.
Okay. Win. I'll take the win. Thank you.
How about that? All right, that's a wrap. Thanks always to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Wednesday, September 17th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. We're now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.